Hello everybody. Today we're doing something that I rather enjoy. No, not just driving a nice Mercedes convertible, but we're going to be looking at a car that is very similar to one I've recently experienced to see if you can notice a difference. Not too long ago, I drove a very nice 2017 Mercedes SL63 AMG, and I have to confess that was one of the biggest car surprises for me of the last 12 months. Absolutely sensational car, which I pretty much instantly fell in love with and would happily have over and above even the SLS, which I found to be a rather flawed beastie. Today though, we're asking one of those tricky petrolhead questions, which is, do you really need the AMG? I am driving, courtesy of channel fan and all-round good guy Sam, his 2014 SL500. Now you could pick up a car quite similar to this for less than half the money you would pay to get into an AMG. Granted, the AMG I drove was a later one, so you could pick up a cheaper AMG too, but let's just be honest, half price sounds good to say, doesn't it? So that's what we're going to stick with. Is this car really half the AMG? On the face of it, I can't really tell the difference between the two. I'm sure there are differences on the outside, but as I'm not a Mercedes expert, I couldn't really tell them apart. The fact is, the SL in general is a fairly rare car here in Britain, so it's quite an unusual thing to see regardless. This is in the fairly classic and safe colour combination of silver over black leather interior. The interior feels pretty much just as nice as in the AMG. The only difference that I've really noticed is the fact that this gear lever is a different design. In the AMG it had the tiny little stubby AMG style one. So really, from a pure looks and feel perspective, I don't think there's any reason the AMG is that much better. Now, the heart of an AMG, of course, is always its engine, and the SL63 was no exception, because powering that car, you would find a 5.5 litre bi-turbo V8, making some 580 horsepower. The SL500, though, is no shrinking violet by comparison, because here you'll find a slightly smaller 4.7 litre bi-turbo V8, so still bigger than the engine you'll get in an AMG GT. It makes here quite a bit less power, more like 430, so about 150 shy of the 63, but still ample torque. There are two things I have noticed while driving this car more or less straight away. This, in comfort mode, is quite a bit more comfortable than the AMG. Doesn't feel quite as happy when you're chucking around a bend, but it does have a sport mode for the suspension, so we'll be playing with that in just a bit. Gear shifts also a little bit slower. They haven't really got that whip crack, which really impressed me in the SL63. This is a pre-facelift car, and later ones would have gotten a 9-speed auto box, but this is still the 7. Perhaps one of the most disappointing differences for petrol heads between this and the AMG is the fact that I can't really hear this car. I put my foot down and it's still just a distant rumble. I mean, I've got the roof down and everything, so you should be able to hear it quite nicely. And the SL63 had that sort of very authoritative, typical AMG sound, not really quite like anything else. This is almost silent. It's not quite as keen to respond as the AMG either. That car had a throttle response which was almost supernatural for something with forced induction. All of the boring bits of the interior are largely the same in here as they are for the later car, so nothing really feels dramatically different. It's really quite serene and refined in here. I'm going to put the gearbox into sports mode, but automatic, just for bimbling through town. There's also an economy mode, I guess that's what the E is, and you then have manual as well. So you don't have quite the same amount of adjustment as you do in the AMG, which has got lots of different settings. It still feels like a reasonably large car, no surprises there. It's not actually enormous when you look at the footprint of it, but it does feel pretty big, especially if your idea of a convertible is, say, an MX-5 or an S2000, that kind of thing. This is a really big step up. But my life, in terms of waftiness, this is absolutely gorgeous. There is no individual drive mode that I can see. Nothing really that fancy, but the car has everything that you need. The dash is really classy, the steering wheel is beautiful in the hand. It really is a very, very fine car. As a boulevard cruiser, I would say this is the superior car to the AMG. It really is very, very nicely set up. I'd say this is a match for the Lexus LC convertible that I drove recently. However, that car really did the twin personality thing very well indeed. When you wanted to have fun with it, it responded fantastically, and it sort of sat really very nicely between, I'd say, this and the AMG. But what is this car like when you do finally get yourself onto a nice bit of country road and you want to enjoy some of that performance? Let's find out. We'll put the car into manual gearbox, and I'm going to pop the suspension over into sport mode too. Even just around town over the manhole covers and things, sport mode suspension does really change the characteristics of the car. Feels quite a bit harder, but let's see if that can translate into any added fun when you're in the twisties. So here's the truth of it. The SL500 actually behaves very much like I expected the SL63 to. There's just a little bit of disconnection between you and all of the controls. The chassis is, okay, a bit stiffer in sport mode, but it still feels like it wants to pitch and yaw just that little bit more. So in the Benz, never feels quite as composed as the AMG did. Then the engine, it just doesn't have that crazed response of the AMG. It's potent enough, it's still very quick, but it just hasn't got that accuracy that you want from a sports car. Perhaps most disappointingly though, the one piece of the puzzle I thought would be just as good, the gearbox, really isn't. Even when you're absolutely on it, quite slow to respond and just doesn't do what you'd hope that it would. All of this means that when you do start to really want to enjoy the car, it kind of falls apart and turns into a bit of a pudding. I suppose this is excellent news because it means that the AMG really does set itself apart. And that means that what you've got is genuinely two cars with a very different character, because even this in sports mode is still probably as comfortable as the AMG was in comfort mode. And so the decision as to which one you should buy really is a fairly easy one. Do you want to drive the car hard? In which case, I'd say the AMG is worth every single extra penny. If you don't, yeah, I'd say save your money. Get one of these. It's a fine thing. But let's drive it for a little bit more, shall we? Because I'm here now. It's got the grunt to get past other traffic, that's for sure. But you do just have to work out what you want to do a little bit further in advance. Yeah, I feel like the chassis is now about half a second behind the steering. You can tell this car is not set up for response and accuracy. And that's probably why the AMG was just always that little bit firmer than I kind of expected it to be. This is the trade-off. This car does not have the upgraded suspension, which I think is air ride. It's on the regular dampers. Somebody tell me if I'm wrong there. I don't know these things very well. The whole point of today is I wanted to go into it knowing as little as I could, seeing instead whether I could feel a difference. And you really can. When you're really up in the rev range, the engine responds just a little bit better, but there's just a weird moment. You put your foot down, it doesn't even seem to have turbo lag. It's just got nothing, then everything. It doesn't sort of smoothly build boost like most modern engines do. It all feels just a little bit haphazard, this car. It is not happy doing this at all. What it wants to do is have me press the comfort button, put it back into auto mode, but sport auto, that'll do nicely, and then relax. And the car relaxes with you. I would say if you can't make your mind up as to whether you want a sporty experience or a comfy one, the LC convertible is a very good car to look at, but has its own compromises. If you want to know more about that, check out my review on that particular car. With the Merc, I think you've really got to pick the model to your requirements. They haven't tried to make this into an AMG light. I don't think they're trying to fool anyone there, and that I'm okay with. So that hopefully is a simple question answered. Big thank you to Sam for bringing his car out. Don't forget to like, please comment down below, and subscribe if you haven't already. I shall see you all for the next one. Bye-bye.